Michael and Christina took long time to cope with the emotional residue remaining from their ordeal traversing the Muslim world. They had huge measure of healing when Christina was blessed with 2 daughters. She named their firstborn Aphrodite, and their second child, Ifat. Michael eventually gave in to the insistent begging of his wife. She was adamant about writing her story. She needed to let the world could know what life was like behind a Muslim curtain of propriety. Specifically, she wanted to show the world the kind of torture and abuse Islam directed at minorities and women, all legal for a Mohammedan. Accordingly, after delivering her second daughter, Christina requested her husband to write down whatever was dictated, making no addition or omission or change. She told him to assume the role of an outsider, and to not see his task as a husband, rather as a detached professional ghostwriter. At first, Michael was at odds with the idea. He nursed a nagging fear that she would run into trouble with American Muslim terrorists again. When she abruptly told him that she would hire a third person to write her story since he was reluctant to do so, Michael bit the bullet and acceded. Christina believed that the world should know her story so others may escape falling victim to the same kidnap, rape, and imprisonment that befell her. Her covert visit to Sudan gave her first-hand experience in how Muslim women and children suffer from the misogynistic teachings of Islam, what she thought was only restricted to lands connected to Arabia. Christina wanted the world to hear the crying voice of the little slum girl, Ifat Khan, and feel her tears when she was subjected to the Muslim institution of child marriage. She wanted the world to experience the suffocation and feel the ugly, cruel pain she endured as a child, under the hand of her husband, the aging Sheikh Faiz bin Ahmed. She longed for a word of apology from the Muslim world for keeping quiet while she was suffered a decade of rape. She needed the world to validate that she was not wrong to condemn the pioneer of child rape. She wanted the justice system to stop accusing the wrong persons and instead openly condemn the sanctioning founder of a religious system that oppressed and abused women. Christina was aware of the heated assertions of some Muslims, Muslim feminists, and Western feminists, and other non-Muslims that it is the people who wrongly practice the religion to be blamed and not the Quran nor the founder of Islam. To that end, she simply wanted to bring to forefront, to confront the collective conscience of the international community, to some urgent questions. Why are Muslim women among the most oppressed women in the world? Why do so many religious critics collectively arrive at the conclusion that Muslim women are the most abused women on earth? Why is it only Muslim female children get married even before reaching the age of puberty? Why do only Muslim female children get genitally mutilated? Why are most Muslim females' marriages non-consensual? Why do Muslim women among the few that have to share their husbands with others? Why the Quran the only religious book that encourages man to beat his wife and his other female relatives such as his sisters, daughters, and cousins? Why are the only women in the world who cover their bodies from head to toe Muslims? Why are honor killings only practiced in Muslim societies? Why isn't Muslim woman allowed to divorce her husband when her husband is permitted to divorce her with or without any reason? Why is a Muslim woman denied custody of her children after a divorce? Why are the majority of people who get stoned, women of Saudi Arabia, Iran, Pakistan, Somalia, and Afghanistan? Why many Muslim women are denied their rights to education, work, and other public activities and kept at home like prisoners? Why are many women in overtly Muslim countries being treated like animals? Why many Muslim women are treated like chattel, enslaved by men, and sold in marriage or bartered? Why Muslim women are always in shackles and fetters? Why Muslim women are always in the news because of their abuse by their men and their kin? Why Muslim women are not allowed to rule their countries or become caliphs? It happened only once, when an Egyptian royal woman, called Shajara al-Dur, after the death of her husband the ruler of Egypt, declared herself the new sultana or queen. The Muslim imams and scholars condemned her caliphate, preached sermons against her, and stirred the entire nation against her. Muslim Egyptians strongly protested on the streets against her un-Islamic decision and for 2 months destroyed half of Cairo until they forced her to step down. Shajara al-Dir was stripped naked and beaten to death with clogs by the bondmaids of al-Mansur Ali, the new ruler of Egypt. Her naked body was found lying outside the citadel. According to the historian Ibn Is, Shajara al-Dir was dragged from her feet and thrown from the top naked, with a cloth around her waist. She stayed in the moat for 3 days, not buried. Al-Makrizi, page 494, Volume 1, and Ibn Takri, pages 102 and 273, Volume 6. When Christina began to pen her life down, she was 30 years old. Her tale went back 23 years when her mother and her arrived at the Jeddah International Airport. She notes that memories of her early childhood in the slums of Mumbai weren't clouded with abuse, but with poverty and misery. She remembered very little of her days in the slums of Dharavi. As such, she covered her life in the slums of Mumbai in a couple of paragraphs. She was clear that being born rich was no honor and conversely, being born to a poor family was no crime. She explained that she was born to a poor Muslim family, what was the one of the largest slums in Asia. She was the firstborn among 6 children and did not recall much of her brothers. She also retained only a little knowledge of the cause that led her father to take his own life. She remembered that her father killed himself when he became incapacitated. It was the first time she had ever seen a corpse. The death of her father imposed an extremely heavy burden on her mother. Her mom had to take care of her 6 small children, her own parents, and her husband's parents. Christina remembered that she used to take care of her 5 brothers and 4 grandparents while her mother worked in the homes of rich people, from 6 o'clock in the morning to 8 o'clock in the evening. At the age of 7, she needed a babysitter to take care of her and her 5 brothers, but her family's circumstances made her the babysitter instead. She also needed a cook, a cleaner, and a washerwoman, but she was the only one who performed all their house chores. Christina had no knowledge how her mother obtained visas and tickets to Saudi Arabia. She remembered that she left her 5 brothers behind but had taken her along. While her memories of the slums in Mumbai were filled with the mists of abject poverty and misery, she could not recall ever being abused, molested, raped, or tortured by anyone. Her first raw experience of abuse happened when her mother and her were abducted by 2 Saudi policemen the day of their arrival in Jeddah. From that time onward, Christina's memories grew increasingly vivid, with memories as fresh as if they had happened a few days ago. It was the first time she had ever seen the act of coitus. It wasn't any woman, but her own mother. It wasn't just sex, but was a rape by 2 people simultaneously. From that day, she formed many dysfunctional notions about sex, role models, and coping skills. For her, sex was subjugation of the woman by the man. Nothing else. Her 10 years of kidnap, captivity, and rape by the old Saudi served to reinforce her notions and values about sex. For 10 long years, she was isolated from the rest of the world and kept in isolation by her captor, who began to rape her when she was 7 years old. He remained, alive and well in her memory as an old monster who kept raping her body and sucking her blood like a vampire. Christina knew that she could write a page for each of the days she spent under the control of the old man. She would have needed to write 3,665 pages to describe the rape, abuse, and torture she experienced day and night for 10 long years under the cruelty and brutality of that evil old man. As far as Christina knew, 1 other female child went through the same kidnap and rape experience, the child bride Aisha, who was subjected to the experience for 12 years. Aisha was married to the Prophet Muhammad at the age of 6 and stayed under his subjugation until his death, whereupon she was freed from his tyranny and captivity at the age of 18. For 4,384 days Aisha remained imprisoned and tortured by a man as old as her grandfather. He started to thigh her when she was 6 and went on until he began to rape her at the age of 9. Christina found it difficult to believe that Muhammad continued to molest and thigh Aisha for 3 years without attempting to penetrate her vagina. In her personal experience, she knew that the old man did not wait that long before he began to finger her up and shortly forced his distended male organ into her underdeveloped tiny vagina. She felt as if he was sawing her small body into two halves. What a horrific, cruel, and painful experience a girl of her age had to endure. It would have been lesser painful, if he had beheaded her instead. As a measure of healing and reconciliation, Christina wrote many pages describing her 10 years of abuse, yet she felt they were just a single drop in an ocean of suffering and torture. She knew that no rational and moral human being could do to a female child of 7 what that evil old man had done to her for 10 years. They were too graphic to write down on paper. It was a barbaric and inhumane for a human being to contemplate. It pointed to a person void of feelings of love and mercy. Even her second captor did not do to her what that evil old man had done to her. In spite of the fact that Mahmud Khan was a sadistic man and kidnapped her for many months, still for Christina it was nothing comparing to the pain and suffering she experienced when the old man began to rape her at 7 till she was 17. Mahmud Khan, accordingly, had less pages dedicated to him. After summarizing briefly her bitter experience in the farmhouse of her second captor, Christina began to write about the long road she walked all alone with a shuttered personality. She suffered with an imprisoned and conditioned mentality. She remained trapped in her childhood. She remained a 7-year-old girl that never grew up. She grew physically, but she was imprisoned in a child's of mind. She knew that those 11 years of abuse and torture left her devoid of a sense of belonging. She was like a bird that was imprisoned in a cage for so long that with freedom, she had lost the ability to fly. She was like the prisoner who was kept in a solitary confinement for many years and when was set free, he lost the ability to speak. She was like an innocent lamb that was walking among ravenous wolves. There is some truth in the saying, a nation of sheep will beget a government of wolves. Some people used her to fulfill their motives while others abused her. Beginning with her Hindu mother, Rani Krishna, who started out as the Good Samaritan, but her Hindu culture and religion influenced her to deprive Christina of her own baby daughter, forcing her to marry her selfish nephew, Rahul Patel, who in turn forced her to accept Hinduism and to change her name, and finally accusing her of committing an incestuous adulterous relationship with her Muslim lover. It was her Muslim lover who gave her a wonderful time for a short period and altered her views on consensual sex. The short time she spent with her Muslim lover, Uncle Jimmy, like a short halt at an oasis during her hazardous journey in her never-ending arid desert road. She was like a rogue planet that lost contact with its parent star and went stray wandering about in the vast cosmos without a sun to orbit around it. Her life from the age of 7 became like a dying star that had been sucked in by a black hole. She walked all alone without father or mother, without brother or sister or any relatives, and no friends. Wherever her destiny took her, she encountered haters and terrorists who plotted to kill her. She never went to any continent, country, or city without running into those children of darkness who vowed to assassinate her for insulting their false prophet who was the pioneer of child abuse. The cruel hands of those Muslim terrorists were able to reach her in her hiding place and deprived her of her Muslim husband and daughter. Nevertheless, Christina considered her love with Uncle Jimmy a selfish love. In her book, she blamed him for forsaking his wife and children and falling in love with a girl who was 20 years his junior. She also held herself accountable for falling in love with a married man and causing him to cheat on his wife and finally forsaking his family because of her. She admitted in her writing that her Muslim lover gave her wonderful time. Not surprisingly, Christina shared in her book that she had never known the real meaning of life and beauty of love, nor had she ever found anyone she could love without being expected to give something in return until she met her lover and spiritual friend, Michael Lewinsky, the completed Jew. He was nothing like all the men she had ever come across in her life. Every man she met yearned to own her beauty and body in order to maximize his pleasure and enjoyment, and that including her Muslim lover, Uncle Jimmy. Michael had looked beyond her beauty and body and had touched her soul. He introduced her to a love which went beyond her corporeal body and love for her spiritual well-being which reflected her true self. To him, she was not merely a body, but a persona created in the image and likeness of God. It took Christina a while to fully grasp the kind of spiritual love she was being showered with up until the time she was saved as a Christian. Before her salvation, she was spiritually dead, a legacy following her from childhood, a gift robbed by a satanic religion that legalized and justified all the evils that had befallen her. Christina, in retrospect, knew that she did not internalize her spiritual lessons properly, which led to her falling once again into the hands of a selfish man who just wanted to use her. Her Christian husband, Bruno Fernandez, despite external appearances was no different from the evil men who came before him. Her Muslim stepfather was another evil man who was consumed with wickedness and contributed even more misery and suffering to her life. Because of him, she was physically and sexually assaulted by the Muslim boys and was brutally raped by 2 Indian Muslim policemen. Her painful experience of being raped by the lawmen was a cruel reminder of the ordeal her own mother had endured in Saudi Arabia. She felt as if a curse had just passed from mother to daughter. Christina walked alone for many years in what seemed to be a dark and long tunnel. She had fully expected reunite with her mother after all her tribulations. At that time, she reasoned, a hug from a mother might well soothe her pain and a kiss from her might have healed her many wounds. She had prepared herself for everything except for the public betrayal by her own mother. She expected that her mother might not recognize her due to the long period of separation and the fact that she was now an adult. She was even prepared to endure a DNA test to prove her identity as daughter. She simply did not anticipate that her own mother would deny that she had once a daughter by the name of Ifat Khan. No matter what had happened to the mother in arduous life, there was no possible way that she could have forgotten the name and existence of her only daughter. Christina's accumulated agonies that caused by her kidnap, torture, rape, captivity, and suffering remained bottled up for many years. When she was publicly disowned and betrayed by her own mother, she felt as if something inside her core had exploded. Everything in her mind ran askew, logic was pushed aside. Her vision darkened to the point where she could no longer see a way forward. Everything suddenly turned black. When she reopened her eyes, people appeared to her as if they were negatives superimposed on film. Then, her mind began to translate to her those images as scary ghosts, monsters, zombies, and vampires. When Christina had her breakdown, everyone she knew forsook her, even her Christian husband, Bruno Fernandez. Her mother walked out of her life. She became a heavy burden in a dirty and neglected Mumbai mental hospital. If India allowed mercy killings, her doctors and nurses would surely have dosed her with a lethal dose of barbiturates. She became too much for them to handle or tolerate. Her Christian husband was her only legal guardian, and had he been asked to have decided on her disposition at that time, he surely would have opted for euthanasia. And her death would have given him some comfort, especially after he received a letter from the American consulate notifying him that his wife withdrew her sponsorship application for her spouse and his parents. Luckily, it was her faithful friend and spiritual lover who stood by her side and did everything he could in order to have her transferred from that filthy mental hospital in India to a proper mental health facility in the United States of America. While she was describing the care and love given by Michael, Christina's words almost became poetic. She had never composed poems before, but the reader of those concluding pages would sense that her words were coming directly out of her heart and not from her mind. The core theme of her book was about her sad and tragic life story. 90% of her book was about her 10 years under the tyranny of Sheikh Faiz bin Ahmed, her captivity by Mahmud Khan, her 2 years with her selfish Hindu husband, Rahul Patel, and her 1.5 year under the harassment of her selfish Christian husband, Bruno Fernandez. 10% was divided unequally between her 2 lovers Jamal Khan and Michael Lewinsky. She would probably need to allocate 50% of her life story to be dedicated to Michael if she was to include their foray into the Muslim world. That huge portion of her life was excluded because of many personal considerations. She chose to end her life story after she was transferred for medical care, from India to America, and her subsequent recovery. Christina had not forgotten to mention her unfulfilled dream of building a 17-floor building for the orphans and homeless children of Mumbai. That noble dream was still pending, and she believed that one day the Lord Jesus Christ would enable her to bring it into reality. She also mentioned briefly her golden period when she won Miss Mumbai, Miss India, and finally Miss World. Her millions of US dollars and crores of Indian rupees, and the overseas properties, which she inherited from her evil Saudi captor, were never considered by Christina as luck or success. She believed that the just God had taken the wealth of her enemy and oppressor and given it to her. Likewise, the 30 crores of rupees, 300 million Indian rupees that her English teacher had taken from her second captor through blackmail were treated with the same disdain for money. Furthermore, the 50 crores of rupees, 500 million Indian rupees that the Mumbai court forced his widow to pay her as compensation, Christina simply counted as another recompense from the loving God. Finally, the 12 million US dollars that she received from her Indian lawyer after he sold her property at Saudi Arabia. Christina Lewinsky had over 115 million American dollars as a bank balance when she wrote her life story.